Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the HardBody channel. And today I'm going to do something a little different. So I've been working on a new concept recently, and I actually wanted to show you guys the entire screen printing process from start to finish. And while working on this new concept, I figured I'd just film as much as I can. And I actually went through the entire process. So I actually want to share that with you guys. For all you keeping up with our brand, thanks, it means the world to me. And I want to show you how I make my products. What differentiates me, I think, is that I'm doing all this by hand in-house. So, a lot of brands will just have a design, go to a print shop and bang out 100 t-shirts. But for me, a lot of the fun, it's not just designing the concepts, but actually doing it all by hand, by myself, in-house, and printing the final products on my own my own press. To me, that's really satisfying, and I hope you guys appreciate that as well. Every piece that I'm making is handcrafted. So let's take a look. So here, you're going to start with the most important part, an actual silk screen. And here I have a scoop coater. It's filled with emulsion. The emulsion is what you use to actually create the stencil that you print on. And you always want to make sure you have a good bead of emulsion that builds up at the bottom before you pull up on the screen, as you'll see here. And that's what I'm looking out for. And as you can see, I'm working under a yellow light, and that has minimal UV exposure. Think of it as like a photography dark room. It's the same thing. Um, you want minimal UV to hit your emulsions because you don't want your emulsion to cure while you're working with it. Otherwise, you waste that screen and that emulsion. And typically, you want to coat both sides, both the ink side and the print side. Um, with the scoop coater that I'm using, I just use the thin side of the scoop coater, and that seems to work out well. I have really good stencils after I'm done with the whole process. So that works best for me. But a lot of shops will do it differently. They might hit it each side twice. Just kind of depends. You want to make sure it's nice and clean, no debris or anything, nice and smooth. And as you can see here, that's my actual screen rack. The screens on the bottom are the ones that are already done and ready to go and used for printing. The ones on the top are the ones that I recently just coated, and I let them dry typically for about 24 hours before I even attempt to work on them, just to make sure they're 100% dry. And this thing just kind of lives in the corner of my living room. I just kind of stuff it under the counter, and it works out well. Like I said, I've a minimal space to actually do all this stuff, so it's taken me a while to really fine tune the process, but I've got it down now to a science. And there you can see on my screens. So I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So here now we're going to the actual exposure part to expose the screen. And yes, this is my bathroom. And as you can see, I have a piece of wood that's being held down by a kettlebell. And from there, I'm hanging a lamp that has a UV bulb inside of it. And what I'm doing now is I'm actually using a piece of black foam, putting it on the back of the screen. That way no light goes through the back and doesn't overexpose your screen. And what I mean by exposure is that I'm curing the emulsion so that it's ready to work with. So here I'm just making sure that it's dead center to the lamp. And one thing to note is that the lamp has to be 15 inches above the screen. That is, from my understanding, the optimal distance that you need for exposing screens and curing the emulsion. So what you actually use to burn the image onto the screen is the transparency. So it's just a plastic sheet with an image, black image it uses toner. Pretty much the same thing as any overhead transparency from school back in the day, if you're as old as I am. So, and then usually, if you want to do black or white, you need, the standard image and the inverted image. So here I'm doing two images on one screen. So I taped them on using clear tape, and as you can see here, the lamp is now on, and I have a timer set. So depending on the tilt screen that you're using, for 110 mesh, it's about 8 minutes, and for 200 to 230 mesh, it's about 10 minutes. So this is the actual curing process of the emulsion. And you can see there both the images that I have on that screen. Those are the ones that I'm going to actually use to print on the shirts. And now my timer went off, so I can turn the UV bulb off. So after this, that screen is done. And one thing that I didn't mention before is that I actually have a piece of glass that holds down the transparencies just to make sure it's 100% flat onto the screen. And again, I have yellow lights in the bathroom, which is how I'm working on with it. So like I said, you kind of want a darkroom atmosphere anytime you work with emulsions. And here I'm just taking out the transparencies, so we're good to go on that. And the next phase is to actually wash out the uncured emulsion from the screen. A lot of shops will use a pressure washer. With the emulsion that I use, I haven't had a need for such pressure. I actually have a garden hose in my unit, and that's what I use to wash out the excess emulsion. And I just put it on the jet setting, blast out the uncured emulsion, and that's pretty much it. And here I'm just making sure all the emulsion is washed out. Once it's good to go, yeah, once I see it's 100% done, there's no excess, then the screen is ready to go and just be dried. And that's the final product right there. And typically I let my screens dry overnight as well. So now here I'm actually on press. So this is kind of what this has all been working towards. So here you see my screen press. I have a large piece of double-sided tape over the platen. I'm just cutting off the excess off the edges. And the double-sided tape is what keeps your garment in place while you print on it. If it moves at any point when you press or when you actually do your print runs, it's going to look bad. It's going to be skewed. So the double-sided tape holds everything in place. It's essential. A lot of shops will use a spray adhesive on the platen, but mine is wood, and a lot of shops use metal platens, and I want to avoid messing the laminate on the wood, so that's why I just stick with the double-sided tape. As you can see here, I'm just peeling off the backside of the double-sided tape, so that platen's ready to go. And as you can see, I have some lines on the platen. Those are just registration marks that I use to line up my image. And here you can see I've loaded the garment on, so I'm working on a long sleeve tee, on a long sleeve shirt, making sure everything's nice and flat before I press on it. Always make sure you hit up your garment with a lint roller. And this is actually the first print run for this design, so I'm taking my sweet time just to make sure everything's lined up. It's always a little nerve-wracking. You don't really know what the print's going to look like until you have it on press, loaded with ink. And of course, you got to make sure you stay hydrated. So here we are. I'm just making sure everything's lined up. As you can see, I've loaded the screen already with some ink. And now I'm actually ready to print onto the garment with the squeegee. So with the first pass, I took my time with it. Just I wanted to make sure there was plenty of ink being printed onto the garment. White inks are usually thicker than other colors, and I typically do 2 hits. So after one pass, I'm just making sure everything's good, and I load the screen again for the second hit. And there we go. Second hit. And now you have your design on your garment. Now, before you take the garment off of the press, you want to partially cure it. And they call that flash drying. And there's different ways to do it. The way I do it is I actually use a heat gun to partially cure my inks before taking them off the press. There's a lot of flash dryer units out there also that just kind of lay on top of your garment on press. But because I have a limited amount of space, I just use a heat gun. Seems to work well. I warm it up to the point where it's tacky but doesn't rub off on your fingers. That's how you know it's partially cured. And now this is the final curing of the ink. I use a heat press here, and it's a heat press you can use for vinyl also, but I only do screen printing, so I just use the heat press to do the final curing of the plastisol ink. A lot of shops will use a conveyor dryer, which is like a little oven where you just load the garment in, and it just bakes your garment with the ink on it. But for me, this works out well. I don't have the space for any kind of conveyor, so what I do is I have a heat press. I set it to 350 degrees, and then as you can see, I put parchment paper over the image or the design with the ink on it, and then just like I said, 350 degrees for 30 seconds. Once it's done, the ink is 100% cured. And there's the final product. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how I do it. Like I said, there's lots of different ways of doing this, but this is the best. This is the best process that I found that works for me, both with my limited capacity and limited tools. Um, so I just wanted to show the process. That it's not just it's me behind the brand, but I'm also actually making these things by hand. So I wanted to show you guys the whole process. So thanks for checking it out. If this is something that's interesting to you, let me know. Like I said, send me a message or leave a comment. If there's something more specific you want me to show, let me know. But I figured with the HardBody Chronicle, any kind of extracurricular things that I have going on with the brand, I'll just upload it to this channel as well. So thanks a lot to all of you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the love. Blessings to all of you. Thank you.